I'm Mark Stevens, author of Government Indicted, and of course, this is very special for those who are familiar with Adventures in Legal Land, because behind me is actually the South Mesa Justice Court, where it really, a lot of this journey that I've been on with the No State Project started. Adventures in Legal Land. In fact, I wrote about the judge in the book, Government Indicted, actually the cover of Adventures in Legal Land, but the judge who I use as a basis for the caricature on Adventures in Legal Land cover was right here, Brian Strong. But this mainly commercial building is where the North Mesa Justice Court is, and where Brian Strong 20-something years ago presided. So getting a view of this is, I have not been back here in probably 15, 20 years easily. I had no reason to be here. It's not a very attractive building, one of the older buildings in Mesa. Just kind of utilitarian there. I don't know what they would call that. I think it's just, that'd just be ugly. But if we walk around here, I actually had jury duty here. I was assigned for jury duty once 20-something years ago, but I got here and we were all excused. They had come to an agreement. I gotta be really careful about where I'm filming here, because right in front of me is the actual court building. So I want to make it so that I don't get the actual court building, because that would not be permitted. So that would be the actual North Mesa Justice Court. So I'm not going to get any more footage of that. I'll probably just X out or blur out any of the other buildings' names that are in here. But this is where it really started. This was back in the mid-90s. So those who have actually read Adventures in Legal Land may recognize that Brian Strong. This is where there was a big shift in how I would do things. So I want to talk today about how I did things. And again, this is not legal advice. I'm not telling anyone to do this. This is more of a retrospective of how I was able to get tickets and IRS complaints tossed out. This is not a recommendation that anybody follow this. So we're just going to talk about the law and how I used it, and that's it. But it was a real wake-up call because what happened with Brian Strong is I was arrested for failure to produce ID. And there's a 9-0 Supreme Court case called Brown v. Texas, where almost word for word that it was illegal to arrest somebody simply to ascertain their identity, which is exactly what I got arrested for. After I presented my legal argument, and I read directly from Brown v. Texas, which I'll put in a link in the description. After reading it verbatim, word for word, what Brian sneered at me was, "That's your interpretation." And I was kind of floored. I didn't know what to do with that. How do you argue that the judge is taking a literal word for word decision from the Supreme Court, 9-0, and he's just blowing it off as that's my interpretation. It's word for word. So that's when another thing clicked for me. It's not really necessary, and it isn't in my best interest to attack something strictly as an issue of law. That it was a lot more powerful about the facts. And so one of the things I want to talk about today is, of course, the impeachment of a witness. They either have the facts, they can either back up their argument or their claim, or they don't. It's not a matter of interpretation. So they may have what they believe are facts, or they may actually present certain facts, but what those facts actually mean may be open to interpretation. So I recognize, well, if they don't have any facts, period, because at this time I had already, in the few cases that I had, noticed a pattern. That pretty much every time I question the witness on the witness stand, these are police officers, traffic at this particular point, that they were always declared incompetent to testify based on what they've already said. So I'll finish this video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a more secure location, so I don't have to worry about where I'm actually filming. And I'm going to talk more about impeaching a witness and why it's important, and why you can use that tool, why I was able to use that tool to get tickets thrown out. Well, this is a lot nicer a spot than the South or North Mesa Justice Court. They're both in the same building there. So I'm just a few miles south in Gilbert. Actually, no, I think this is still Mesa, Arizona. And this is pretty nice. But to get back to what I was talking about as far as the legal aspect of how I did things and why I did it, everything that I've done and why I've had success and why other people, lots of other people have success, regardless of the critics who say I've never had any success whatsoever, just a quick search on the channel will dispel that myth. It's always, just like with my recent videos, always rooted in logic and reason. What are the facts? Always a critical analysis, regardless of what people are accusing me of now. So again, just do a quick, I should just provide a link in the description so I can save the critics the time and they can look at the links. Maybe I'll do another separate video where I actually have the video evidence in there. And it's a little more, they look, even when they say that something has acknowledged that something got tossed out, they still have excuses saying it had nothing to do with me. I can even provide documentation that it was thrown out because of what I presented, and they'll still, so there's always going to be people that do that. And you always have to take it with a grain of salt, and you have to look at the actual facts. Here, where the IRS threw 6 years worth out and explicitly states, based on the information that we presented. Always, this is what I do. This is why we've been so successful, people on all over the world, because we're looking at the evidence and we are taking the allegations that are used against us. This is really what it comes down to. The critics can't show where my logic is off. The only thing that they're able to do is to say that's just not the way it's done. Well, that's okay. There's a fundamental disagreement there. I believe that, and even black letter law, if someone makes an allegation against you, you have a substantive or procedural due process right. So if someone makes an allegation against me, I'm supposed to have a right to defend myself, and they are supposed to have a burden of proof. One who makes the allegation bears the burden of proof. That's basic common sense. That's basic law. So my position is, I don't care what the actual allegation is. If someone makes an allegation X, then they have to prove that. My critics will then turn around and say, no, you can't attack X. You just have to accept it as true, and then use that as some kind of evidence that I'm somehow some kind of fraud and that I'm destroying people's lives. Let alone if they've never actually presented a single name of anybody whose life I've actually destroyed. My gosh, it is just pretty out here today. So impeaching a witness, what does this mean? Anytime someone makes an allegation, they bear the burden of proof. This is basic logic, and it is also fundamental law in the United States and most places like England where they have the common law system. Not groundbreaking stuff. I'm just using basic principles of logic and basic principles of law to attack the credibility of the individual who's making the claim against me. So what does it mean to impeach a witness? Now, typically in traffic and tax cases, what you have, especially when we're talking about traffic cases, you're talking about the testimony of a single individual cop, a police officer, and he's making legal conclusions. He saw me in Arizona. The laws apply. He thinks that because I don't have a driver's license or whatever, he believes that he has a jurisdiction to write me a ticket. Jurisdiction, of course, is part of his allegation. He can't prove beyond a reasonable doubt or by preponderance of evidence that I violated the driver's license statute unless he can prove that the laws apply. I'm actually going to bet that I'm going to bet here that you guys are probably more interested in the bunny than on me talking about the law. I think it's more interesting anyway. Very cool. He's running away. So, the police officer has made an allegation against me. Now, I will initially challenge this in a motion that they don't have any actual evidence to support that particular claim. And that to assume that a factual issue is true when the record is devoid of any facts would be unfair and violate due process. It just wouldn't be fair. They're not going to assume facts for me. Why should they assume facts for the cop? Oh, we've got a couple more bunnies. It's really distracting to do this when there's so many bunnies. Okay, so to get back, And I'll have more bunnies. I'll have to put them back at the, more of the bunny footage at the end of this particular video. And we've had things thrown out in the pretrial stage because they don't have any facts. And there's plenty of evidence here on my channel. You just have to do a quick search. But it doesn't always work out the way. Sometimes we have to. It sucks. Sometimes, oh, look at this. Sometimes we actually have to go to trial, and that sucks. So it comes down to I would have to put the prosecution's witness on the stand. So unfortunately, the witness would have to be put on the stand. And the witness has already made statements. He's already done a direct examination. He has prior statements that are contained on the complaint. And anything that he may have said on the stop. Just know that when you're on the traffic stop, other than identifying yourself, you keep your mouth shut. I can't be more clear about that. Keep your friggin' mouth shut. You have nothing to say. If you're gonna get a ticket on the side of the street, you can't take I would not suggest talking your way out of it. Just keep your mouth shut. So when it comes time for cross-examination is the defense or opposing counsel's opportunity to question a witness. So all the prior statements that the witness has made up to that point, I am allowed to challenge so that I can impeach. Now, impeach doesn't mean he loses his job, like the twice impeached former president. If he had actually been convicted, he would have been removed from office. Impeaching a witness just means they're not qualified to testify on certain issues or any issues, depends on how broad the ruling is, in that particular trial. See, and this is where it gets kind of dicey, where judges are so pro-cop. Ooh, bunnies. Ooh, it's getting a little darker in here. But judges are so blatantly pro-prosecution that they will let cops testify against me and people that I've worked with, really anybody who goes into a traffic court. They're always pro-prosecution because they probably were a prosecutor before they became a judge. So they'll let the police officer make all sorts of statements. They'll let the police officer testify that literally in these words that I witnessed Mark Stevens violate Arizona law. They'll be able to testify to that. But when I question them on the facts to support that opinion, and they'll testify on cross, you saw me in Arizona. You determined that because I was physically in Arizona that you believe the laws apply to me. That's a legal conclusion he's making on the stand against me. The problem that the judges have is when I followed up this question and I asked for the facts, his prior statement, his prior legal conclusion was based. Now, I know there's going to be douchebags who are going to say it's not a legal conclusion. But however you want to couch it, it's a statement on direct examination, and it is a statement on cross-examination. And if he makes a statement on cross-examination, especially here, when it is literally the foundation of the prosecution's case, the whole thing rests on this. He has to be competent to testify. That's what the rules, that's to be a competent witness. You have to, that's part of the rules on being a competent witness. But most of the time, almost every time, whether it's me or somebody else, the prosecution or the judge having the prosecution's back would object that it calls for a legal conclusion and the witness is not qualified to testify. Well, if he's not qualified to testify, what does that mean? Well, if the judge says that the witness is not qualified to testify, especially when it's the foundation of the case, here it's making a statement that I'm physically in Arizona, and I am physically in Arizona, and that because I'm physically in Arizona, the laws apply. Well, it stands to reason that if he's going to make that testimony and make that statement, he's going to offer that as testimony to support the very complaint and the very foundation of the claim. If he's going to make that statement, I believe, oh, look at that. Now, if he's going to make that statement, I believe fairness and due process require, and they do, that he actually is competent to make those statements, and here almost 100% of the time judges have ruled that they are not competent to make that statement. Where if they're not competent to make the statement, the rules require, it's not fair, it violates due process to have those statements be on the record still. The judges unfortunately tend to be so pro-prosecution that they'll throw the rules out. Do you think for a second that if I was declared incompetent to make a legal claim against the prosecution and I had no evidence and the judge ruled that I wasn't even competent to make the statement, do you think for a moment that that statement could still be used against the prosecution? All I'm really doing is taking the statements that are being used against me, gosh, that is something, and I'm challenging it. So unfortunately, the judge will keep and show his bias, the judge will declare the witness incompetent to testify and will refuse to strike the testimony, will base his decision on allegations and statements that are made from a witness they declared incompetent to actually make those statements. So unfortunately, because of such extreme bias, no, not every case is won. But then again, only Jerry Spence can claim to win every single criminal case. No lawyer, no matter how good they are, there's just too many variables. No lawyer, no matter how skilled they are going to win every single case. And no non-lawyer, no matter how skilled they are going to win every case. You could have the U.S. Supreme Court act as a legal team for somebody. That doesn't mean they're going to win every case. They certainly are not going to win every case. So that's just a few minutes about impeaching a witness and why I do it and why it's been so successful. And if you want to help support the No State Project channel so I can do more videos more frequently, then you can do so by looking in the description. As always, thanks for watching. Ooh, another one. I don't have deep focus on this camera. Background, foreground. Background, foreground. Why would I whistle for a bunny?